Hi again, everyone. It's Rob Ryder. And today, make way for the U.S. Navy Legal Services, which would be the most powerful weapon in the arsenal if we could get our fingers on the trigger, because it has a duty to serve all DoD ID holders. But will they? And as it turns out, it's just not the U.S. Navy. They have this entity called Legal Services, which all the different service branches have, that all work under the same section of Title 10 of the United States Code, and they all have a duty to serve DoD ID holders. And I'll show you where that comes from here in just a little bit. Um, but beyond that, this is an entryway into this other legal system that has to do with the military and not with civilian. And that's a big, big deal. So we got to figure out how to make them use it. The problem, of course, is always that all attorneys are esquires and all esquires are Crown agents. And so it may take a commanding officer who's not an attorney to order some attorney who's a commissioned officer of the Navy, Air Force, whoever, to do the right thing and fill out the paperwork to make it legal. More on that in just a little bit. But I am Staff Sergeant Robert Allen Rutluski, U.S. Army veteran, also known as Rob Ryder. My email address is courtofrecord@aol.com, and YouTube is Rob Ryder with 3 B's, ROBBBRYDER, where you'll find this video and many others. And I put this on here, I might as well talk about it for a second. So on the site I was looking at, it talks about Navy lawyers and Navy legalmen, right? Navy lawyers are commissioned naval officers based throughout the world, ashore and at sea, who practice law, support the Navy, and serve the nation. Okay? And then we got Navy legalmen who possess knowledge and expertise regarding military and civilian legal systems, substantive and procedural law, which qualify them to perform work of a legal nature under the supervision of an attorney. Well, that would be like a paralegal, which is really the person we should be going to for any kind of legal action, is to go to a paralegal, because they're the ones who actually write the legal documents. They write them for attorneys, right? But they won't write one for you because they've been snowballed into believing that they only work for attorneys, or whatever the BS is that they've been brainwashed with, like everybody else. But there is all sorts of power here to be had if we can figure out how to use it. And so, as an example, here just recently, Nick Fuentes, I guess it's going on 9 days ago now, right, in his last podcast, after ye and he had gone to see Trump and so forth and so on, he was lamenting the fact that, what are we going to do about abortion? Right? Yeah, we can talk about it. The Supreme Court says this and da-da-da-da, but nothing seems to happen. Well, Nick, I have your answer, right? It's in military law, not civilian law. And let me show you where it is. So if you went to this thing called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, right? If you just Google that, hopefully Nick's watching now. Somebody got a hold of Nick, and Nick is watching. Nick, go to Uniform Code of Military Justice. You can Google it. You can find, something looks like this. Or you can email me, and I'll send it to you. But you'll see that it's Chapter 47 of Title 10. So it's Title 10, United States Code, Chapter 47, Uniform Code of Military Justice. And we got this section here that talks about punitive articles. So let's just take a look at those real quick, and then we'll get on to the rest of this video. Why is this important? All right, well, here's the punitive articles. So let's list. These are all crimes against military law. And how about this one? Death or injury of an unborn child. Right? That's a military crime. So if you were to bring Planned Parenthood to military law, well, they would be committing a crime by death or injury of an unborn child. All right, it's as clear as can be. So, how do you get, Planned Parenthood under military law? Well, the shit they're doing it in a hospital, and the hospital outside's got a flag on a flagpole. Flag of the United States. That flag is evidence that that structure is under the authority of the military. Because the only public buildings that flags can fly at are under the authority of the military. And if you go inside and you see a gold fringe flag displayed inside, well, that's even more evidence that the military's got jurisdiction there. They may not be there exercising their jurisdiction, but they have the jurisdiction. And if we brought the right charge to them, maybe they would do something about it. But if you're looking to see what to do about abortion, it's right here in this would be Section 919A of Title 10, or it's also called Article 119A of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Death or injury to unborn child. But let's see what else they have. Well, we could get them for conspiracy, get them for false official statements, fraudulent enlistment, appointment, or separation. That would be the person pretending to be your governor who claims to be the commander-in-chief without having taken the proper oath of office, something I covered in many videos prior. We won't get into it now. But public record offenses, aiding the enemy, espionage, spies, failure to obey order or regulation. Right? All these things are, the equivalent of a crime. And so these would be like the different charges. And in another section of this, we'll just look at it real quick since we're here, and then we'll move on. So another section of this, you go down to Article 30, right? So subsection 830 of Title 10, Article 30 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, charges and specifications. It may be preferred only by a person subject to this chapter and shall be preferred by presenting in writing, signed under oath, before a commissioned officer of the armed forces who is authorized to administer oaths. And so you would bring your charges and specifications to this particular officer, and that's how, a crime becomes a crime recognized by the military. So I don't have an answer how to get these people to do it. I'm just saying here it is. It's written, right? Now we have to find a way to force these people to do it. So hang on just a second, please. Okay, so that is military justice. And what we're looking at now is like military justice light, right? This is actually legal services, which is more to do with civil type stuff. They really aren't supposed to get involved in military justice, criminal activity. But when you read it, it's like, well, they should at least, if you go to them, they should refer you to the proper office. Again, we'll get into that in a second. But so if you have been following my videos, you know that my last video I was talking about the original writ, JAG, right, Judge Advocate General's Office, and the UCMJ, the thing we just looked at, Nick. Right, and that there are certain courts that were created under the UCMJ. I guess it's important enough for me to show those, so go to the end here. Right, where one of them is there is a court of record known as the United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. Right, this is written right in Title 10. Right in the UCMJ. So this is a military justice court. Well, this court has this particular jurisdiction called all writs, W-R-I-T-S, all writs jurisdiction. And it's supposed to be able to write or sign any writ of any kind, which is, it's a common law order, basically. Well, this is called the United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. Well, elsewhere in this UCMJ, it talks about the Court of Criminal Appeals and the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. These two different courts where they don't call it United States Court. So it's just interesting that, that they're hiding this one court by sometimes using the United States and sometimes not. And when they're not, then they end up using U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. It's all in the jots and tittles and, the way they write stuff, and it all means something. And I don't understand it all, but, I can see what it is, so that's good enough for me. So anyway, so that's what that last video was about. Okay, well, these guys are supposed to be able to issue all writs. Let me send them a petition and ask for a writ. Right, and this all comes out of Blackstone's, right, Commentaries, the Laws of England, Book 3, Chapter 18, Pursuit of Remedies by Action, and first of the original writ, which says right in it, da 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 da. Just a second. Right, which Blackstone makes very clear that the very first thing you do and when trying to get a remedy is you have to get this original writ. Right? You can't go to the process, the pleadings, or any of these other things until you have an original writ. And to get an original writ, you have to apply for one, petition. Right? And then it goes in to talk about how this is done, but it finally ends up saying that now indeed even the royal writs are held to be demandable of common right on paying the usual fees. For any delay in granting them or setting an unusual or exorbitant price upon them would be a breach of the Magna Carta. Right? So our laws are based on laws of England, and this is the law of England, and this is what it says, so this is the way she is, right? They don't have to like it, they just have to do it. And if you get an original writ, one of the styles you can get is this thing called a praecipe, which then is more like an order to show cause to somebody, where they would go to the person that you're saying owes you some relief and tell them, look, give the dude this relief or come to court and tell us why you're not going to. Right? It's your choice. You could get the relief or you can come answer why not, and then you would have to go on with the court case. But if he comes, if he gives you the relief, well, there really was never a court case. It was all just administrative. But, it's fine. I don't want a court case. I want relief. So anyways, I sent those, and, I knew at the time, I said, well, this really isn't right. I should not be sending anything directly to a military justice court. I should be going through the military because I am under the UCMJ as a veteran. I mean, that was confirmed by a JAG officer that I talked about in that last video that Dana and I had talked to about his case we had filed. You should really watch the video to understand what I'm talking about. Right? Original writ, JAG, and the UCMJ. That if you're a veteran, you're still in the military. We've never been given a discharge order. And because we're in the military, well, we can still use military justice. In fact, we should have an ID card. And so I'm using that as my hook to say, well, this is a national security issue because I don't have an ID card, yet I'm still in the military. Right? So, so I went directly to the courts, which didn't do any good. They didn't answer. Lots of silence. Here we go again. I'm used to that stuff, so I didn't spend too much time worrying about it. But I kept looking around, and I eventually found this website here, which is U.S. Navy Judge Advocate General Corps. And in this particular, and just to show you, so I'm looking at this one, and I found this one here later. U.S. Navy JAG Corps. It's like, well, what's the difference? Well, then you start looking at the way they do their address, and they're different. So this one here has more to do with military justice, like a criminal action, where this other one here has more to do with, civil affairs of some kind. And anyways, I had this part called legal services, and I click on there, and it says, do you need legal assistance? Well, yeah, let me click on that and see where it goes to. And okay, it tells you what it tells you here, right? JAG, Mill, Nave, or JAG, Nave, Mill. Welcome to their site. Talking about legal assistance handouts and so forth and so on. And then, well, where do you live? Well, United States. And, okay, you got to tell them what state. I live in Michigan. And boom, it took me to this page here, right? Regional Legal Services Office for the Midwest. Read, and it's talking about, legal assistance again. And, we got a client intake package. So they want you to fill out the client intake package and mail it to this particular email address. All right, that's all simple enough. Let's look at the form. Right, and, pop. You'll end up with a form that looks like this. So, so if you're in the military now, or you're a veteran, or you're somehow can say you're under the DOD, you should be doing exactly what I just did and downloading this form. Because it's a generic form, as it turns out, that you could use with any legal assistance office. And because there are more than one, maybe we need to, shop for the proper venue, just like they do in the civilian world. And so, I'll show you. I sent a number of these forms out to different places, all with the same information on them. I'm waiting to see what they come back and tell me. Excuse me. Alrighty, and in the same vein, then another thing I found was, well, here's an attorney firm that claims to be military lawyers doing with military law. So I've written one of them, and I got auto reply would be back till Tuesday of this week. We'll see what comes out of it, but to take your issue to these people to take there, right? I don't really care who gets it to them as long as they do something with it. And then just to show that there are other places like the Coast Guard, they have legal assistance. And all of these service branches are all working off the same section of Title 10, right? So it's the same legal assistance for everybody. It's all, if you're in the DOD, it doesn't really matter if you're in the Coast Guard or not. You could go here. If they have the facilities and the ability to take care of your problem, then they should. Right, here's one for Space Force. Right, they have one. And then this was an interesting thing. It'll come up in just a second, where they talk about eligibility for legal assistance, and they tell you who's ineligible. And one of them as ineligible is Disabled American Veteran, DAV, which really that's, right, the DAV is a association of some kind, patriotic association, just like the American Legion is. So I don't know if that's who they're talking about, but they say Disabled American Veteran, medically retired. Well, who the heck is that? Well, it turns out that when they use the term veteran, they mean somebody who's been released from the military, which isn't necessarily what a veteran is. I mean, you have veteran ball players that play ball all the time, but this is one of the definitions they've created, and they actually have two definitions. They use two different definitions. But nevertheless, if they were going to call you a disabled American veteran instead of a disabled service member, right, which is really what you are, then they would say you're going to be, and you've been medically retired, well, then you don't have access to legal assistance. So it's, they use these words to try to put you into a box to say that you don't have anything to your advantage. So, there are more than one. So let's take a minute now. We're going to go look at that form. We'll see what I did. Hang on a second. In fact, I found this handout on, the legal assistance program on the Coast Guard website. And it was pretty plainly written, so we'll just use this as our example, but it would apply to, any of the branches. Legal assistance program established under Judge Advocate General's authority and 10 United States Code, Title 10 United States Code, Section 1044. And it goes on to say, eligibility for legal assistance and members and former members entitled to retired retainer pay or equivalent pay. Well, I say that's me. I mean, I'm not getting it right now, or it's not getting to me, right? But I say I've been retained because I never got a discharge order, right? There's no paperwork in my record that shows I was ever released from the military. And I know that a lot of people under DD-214, the last action on there says that they were released for terminal leave, right? So they went on leave. They weren't released from the military. Other people say that they were sent to the Navy Reserve, Army Reserve, or whatever, right? They weren't discharged from the military. They're just no longer active service. So we would all fall under this section here because we don't have the one thing that you have to have been released, which is an order. And then it goes on to say the survivors of all the people listed in 10A, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Right? So not just myself, or another veteran, but a veteran's survivors. has the same access to this. Right? I mean, it's just, they can argue it all they want, yet there it is. So now how do we get them to do it? How do you get, let's say, a major who's an attorney who's working in JAG to give you legal advice, which is really what this is, right? That's what uh, legal assistance is. It's it's counsel. And the way you get that done is you get some general with a bunch of stars to tell the fucker to do it, and then he will. Right? So that's what I'm saying. We may have to use a little coercive force to get this done, but it's written in the book. So we should just go with the book and say, well, sir, this is what the book says. Right? Why are you denying me justice? So to show you again, because I'd really like somebody else besides myself to file this paper, and whether you're in the military or not, because a lot of the issues we're talking about, it doesn't matter military or not. These are civil issues. It's just living in the world type stuff. So if you were to Google U.S. Navy legal services, you should be able to find this page. Right? And when you do, go to legal services, right? And click, and well, that's when you end up on this page. This is what the home page looks like. Let's start the home page. Right? Then you go into legal services. You have all these different legal services. And do you need legal assistance? Well, let's find out. Click there, right? And they got all these different regional legal offices. So you need to figure out which one is yours. And, here's your choices here. But if you're not really sure, you just put in, again, where you're from. And it'll send you the correct page. Tell you that here's the client intake package, which the thing you download, and then here's the email address to send it to. All right, click on that, and you get your package. Looks like that. Okay, so now that we have that, I highlighted one a little bit. Let's see what this thing says. Legal Assistance Client Intake Questionnaire. Ask for official use only. That's always good. Right? DOD ID number, principal purposes. Information to monitor the caseload in Legal Assistance Office. Because, as you'll see, this applies to anybody who has a DOD ID number. Mandatory disclosure, right? Disclosure of the DOD ID number is voluntary, and there will be no adverse consequences of refusal to disclose. However, an individual may be requested to establish eligibility for legal assistance by other means, right? Other than the DOD ID number. But if you have that, well, that's your eligibility. And sure enough, you put your name in, your DOD number, right? Gender, date of birth. Pay attention now. When they have month, they want you to use 3 digits. Because in Europe, they put the month first, then the date. Here we put the date, then the month, right? So it's easy to get those transposed. And so one way to make sure which one you're talking is say, well, month has to have 3. So for this month, it'd be 0, 1, 2. Branch of service, right? There they all are listed. And then you have this other one that's, DOD. So you don't even need to be in the military to have legal assistance. You need to be in the DOD. Right? DOD contractor. And now here's another interesting thing that businesses can have DOD ID numbers. And so if you were to, let's say you're not in the military, but you are a sole proprietor who's taken the time to go to the IRS website and get yourself an EIN number, you could become a DOD contractor. And then Robert Allen Britluski, the DOD contractor, right, because I'd be doing it in my own name, would get a DOD ID number. Just something to think about. All right, standard information, pay grade, rank, command, your current MOS, end of your active duty. We'll show you what mine looked like in a second, but just standard information. You got a civilian attorney, yes or no? Met with a military attorney yet? Yes or no? Civilian administrative forum. Could be, because where they talk about overseas only, the United States of America is not the same as the United States. It's not the same as CONUS. The United States of America is a society or an organization owned by the Crown that has treaty rights to be here. Under the Treaty of Peace of 1783, it was determined that the United States of America has every right to be in the United States. As, you know, the United States of America, the people that wanted to leave, the Crown did. Because not everybody wanted to part with the Crown. It was a small group. So they came up with this compromise, right? And that's what the Constitution and everything is about. Anyways, one of the things they had on here is domestic violence. And domestic violence, that term is used exactly as domestic violence in Article 4 of the Constitution. It's one of the reasons the military can get involved in, the goings-on in the country. Provide information about the person or business with whom you have a legal dispute. Right? For consumer fraud, abuse, identity theft, it's the person/company committing the fraud or abuse. So, duh. And then you sign it, and you tell them what you may want to talk about. Right? You got wills and estates, military rights, consumer fraud and abuse. Look at that, deceptive acts and practices. Well, that covers just about everything, and that's what I would say we're going to lean on here in just a second. We're not quite there yet. All right, tax law. Same thing. The IRS wants you to pay taxes, and they want you to send them a check, and it says, make your check payable to U.S. Treasury, right? United States Treasury, no, U.S. Treasury. That's what it says on their website. Okay, well then, if U.S. Treasury wants to be paid, then they're the payee, and the payee must have a TIN number, right? Tax identification number, which is either an EIN or an SSN, depending on your status. But if you're claiming to be the government and tax exempt, then you have to have an EIN as the government. Well, as you find out when you ask these people, well, then you want me to pay you, then send me the W-9 of the IRS, of the U.S. Treasury. They can't send you one because it doesn't exist. It doesn't have one. It's the same with your property taxes. It'll say pay your property taxes to like Kent County Treasurer. But you contact the Kent County Treasurer and say, look, it says here I got to send you a check, pay the order of. I need you to fill me out a 1099, in their name. They can't do it because there is no entity called Kent County Treasurer that's got a TIN number. They're really not the government. And so the reason that's so important is when you're paying taxes, whenever you write a check for over $600 to somebody, right, you're supposed to either ensure they have a EIN number by getting the W-9, or if they don't, you're supposed to hold back 25% of the check, right, as a backup withholding. And if you don't, and you send the check to this place that doesn't have an EIN number, even though they said that they were the U.S. Treasury, but they ain't got an EIN number, technically, you just committed tax evasion. Right? So they know who you are. You wrote the check. Right? But they don't know who this entity is that you wrote to because there's no EIN number for them. And so then they blame you. Now you're the enemy of the state for sending a full check to somebody who doesn't have an EIN number or a TIN number. Well, that's two things. Then it's a tax law problem. It's also deceptive acts and practices because they're saying, we're going to take your house. You don't pay these taxes, but they won't give you their TIN number. Then it sounds to me like it's a crime happening. And that's how we should, be addressing it with these people. Anyways, then you have a place to fill out the form, just a short little thing. You can't make this any longer than what it is. And it didn't say you could add a sheet, but I guess you could if you wanted to. And then if you want to get your service, remotely, so you don't even need to go to the office, right? That they could all do it remotely. Just, hey, just fill these forms out. All right, so that's what I did. And let's take a look at what I did real quick. Yeah, okay, right. Now they want you to put your name backwards, but it's in parentheses, and so that's really not my name anyways. My name's Robert Allen Rutluski. You want my name? It's Robert Allen Rutluski. It's not Rutluski, Robert Allen. That's the way the Jews might do it, because they read from right to left. But I'm not a Jew, and so it's left to right, and I'm Robert Allen Rutluski. DOD ID number? Yeah, I have one of those. You know, all the stuff filled out. I wasn't really sure which one of these I should be, so I just checked them all. Right? This information here, this comes off your DD-214. It's supposed to be 1988. I made a mistake there. 1988. Right? Address and so forth. No. Yes. I'm a victim of a crime. Yes. And it's domestic violence. Yes. Why? Because I'm a victim of a crime. So who is it? Well, it's the Department of the Army. Armed Forces of the United States. And, of course, they have an address. And then I don't know if you noticed that, you know, when you sign these things or when you click on the proper section, right, you're going to end up doing this electronic signature. So if you've not done it before, when you first go to do this, you may have to do a little setup or something. I don't remember exactly how it works, but, you know, sure enough, what I had, right, it's about military rights. And just so don't forget, this SCRA, this is that Service Members Civil Relief Act, which one of the things I'm going to use is my reasoning here in just a second. Okay, and then briefly describe the issue. Well, it's a national security emergency. I'm a voluntary enlistee, subject to military justice in accordance with the UCMJ, privileged to military due process, and a party of interest to an executed bilateral agreement. It'd be called your DD4 form, DD Form 4. With the United States, that mandates as long as I am retained by the armed forces, I'm entitled to receive pay allowances and other benefits as provided by law and regulation, all of which is now unjustly being withheld from me. It is also a treaty obligation upon the United States to issue me a military identification. Under Article 17 of the Geneva Convention 3, which is relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, and the DoD Law of War Manual, Section 943, the United States must provide military identification, and having not done so is a national security emergency. My claim to military status and entitlement can be easily proved by the prima facie evidence available from the Secretary in the form of a certificate of service, as that phrase is legislated to mean in the United States Code, which should be Title 50, United States Code, Section 4012, Certificates of Service, person reported missing, and prove that there is an ongoing national security emergency caused by the United States failing to issue me my military identification. I want my pay, allowances, other benefits, and military ID. All right, that's what I complained about and sent it to this RSO. And, well, on that same day, it got fucking denied. Right? Now this, well, actually it didn't get denied. Right? This is a simulation of a denial. Because look at it. Have you ever gotten anything written to you in, you know, blue ink? Everybody's going to say, oh, blue ink, that means, you know, it's for real. No, it doesn't. Blue is fictitious. Black is real. Black ink is made of carbon, lasts forever. Blue ink is made of a dye, and it fades over time. So they never write legal documents in blue ink. They write them in black ink. It's common law. Been doing it that way since the beginning. So anyways, this non-common law reply I got was to Staff Sergeant Ryder, which obviously I'm not Staff Sergeant Ryder. Right? They know who I am. It's on my fucking form. So, I mean, this is intentional, right? I'm sorry. From our review of the DEERS database, which is supposed to determine if you're, uh, authorized to have an ID card and so forth, you do not appear to be eligible for legal assistance services. We are able to support active duty retirees and their dependents. The system lists you as a disabled veteran. We appreciate your service to the country, but unfortunately, we're not able to assist you. You may be able to obtain assistance from the University of Michigan Law School Veterans Legal Clinic. Right, sincerely, blah, 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 blah. And then, he's supposed to be the Thomas E. Diggin, Legal Assistance Department Head, Regional Legal Service Office, Midwest. Well, I didn't like that. I mean, the great thing was I got a reply. Got somebody, because when I did the thing going to the courts, nobody even replied. Well, they did reply, and they'd say, you're denied also. I should say that. They did say that. But this was his answer, right? And it's like, well, shit, now what do you do? So what I did is I filled out another one, right? So all this information here basically stayed the same, right? Except now the person causing the problem is this Thomas Diggin. I don't know his middle name, right? He had an initial, and I'm not going to put that because that's not his name. And I said, consumer fraud abuse. I'm going to go with deceptive acts and practices. Right? An individual using the alias Thomas E. Diggin, who claims to be the Legal Assistance Department Head, Regional Legal Office, Midwest, is using deceptive acts and practices to insinuate that I am not entitled to military due process and legal assistance. In his email reply, as Deegan, Thomas, blah, 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 he stated, Staff Sergeant Ryder, I'm sorry, I reviewed DEERS database. You do not appear to be eligible for legal assistance services. We're able to support active duty retirees and their dependents. The system lists you as a disabled veteran. Right, that was what they sent me. And he sent it in blue ink from an email address, which says us.navy.mil at the end. Be advised, not only am I not Staff Sergeant Ryder, but us.navy.mil used in Deegan's email address is a completely different outfit than navy.mil as used in the email address, right, that I sent it to. Right, this says navy.mil. He answered from us.navy.mil. I submitted my request for legal assistance. I submitted my request for legal assistance too. I did not accept Deegan's accusation that I am not eligible, and the prima facie evidence of my eligibility status in the form of a certificate of service under the signature of the Secretary of the Army as described in the Army United States Code at 50 USC 4012 will prove my eligibility. Deegan provided no proof, but only an accusation I'm not entitled. I rebut his accusation, demand military due process. All right, so I sent this in yesterday. We'll see what they come back with today. So just really quickly, if we go back and we look at what did he say? All right, we support active duty retirees and their dependents, period. Right? He didn't say who they didn't support. He just said who they did, and he didn't necessarily give a complete list. He just listed some things. But it said that the DEER system has me down as a disabled veteran. Well, let's go back and look and see what the Coast Guard said, right? Because this section here comes right out of Title 10, right? Eligibility for legal assistance. And as you can see, right, it's got members of armed forces or of active duty, members and former members entitled to retire to retainer pay or equivalent pay, officers, commissioned corps, members of reserve components, right? He didn't mention everybody. He just cherry-picked who he was going to mention. So I say, that's incorrect, and I'm going to try it. But there are people that are going to watch this video that, they basically would meet the criteria that, that even this guy couldn't deny. I mean, they're either a retiree or they're active duty. Because active duty is supposed to be using this also. And active duty has the same problems we do. They're being told to pay property taxes or income taxes and make a check payable to some entity. And what we're not doing is making that entity give us their W-9. They don't have a W-9, or can't provide you a W-9, right? Request for taxpayer identification number and certification, which whoever the payee is supposed to go on box 1. And once they're in there, then that's whose W-9 this is. We're the requester. You put your information in here. So let's say you've been told to make your mortgage payments to a certain name. Write your checks out to whomever. Well, get the W-9. In fact, send it to the servicer and tell them, put your information in here as a requester, and tell the servicer you need the W-9 of the party that wants to be paid. If they won't send it to you, then you can say, well, that's deceptive acts and practices. Because you'll see that even those that are exempt, they still have to have a taxpayer ID number. They still have to, file a form. So, but we do have these exemption codes, which are listed on page 3. Let's go look at page 3 real quick. Right, here's the exemption codes. 2, 3. Exemption. 4. Right? The United States or any of its agencies or instrumentalities, a state, District of Columbia, U.S. Commonwealth, possession, political subdivision, or its instrumentalities. These are all things that can claim an exemption, but they still have to have a freaking ID, taxpayer ID number. And so, if they can't fill this form out, excuse me, every jot and tittle, and have the name up here of the name that they want the check made out to with an EIN number, then I say, well, it needs to be investigated. Or you're making payments to somebody who doesn't have a TIN number. And even though you're going to tell the IRS, well, I was paying my IRS taxes, they don't have to believe you. Now, they will because, somebody just wants to take your money. But if they can't fill out a 10, why are you sending them a check? Because if you were to read, this whole thing, you'd find out that there's a thing called backup withholding taxes. And that's what you have been obligated to collect from people who don't have a TIN number. If you're going to write them a check, you got to hold back 25%. And then you have to report it on a 1099 to the IRS, and then you got to send a freaking cover letter, and it's got a whole freaking procedure you're supposed to follow. Well, instead of doing that, I want to challenge the fact that I wrote the check in the first place and say, this is deceptive acts and practices. Somebody's pretending to be the government, asking me to pay property taxes or income taxes or mortgages or car payments or whatever. If they won't give you a TIN number, don't, I'm not going to tell you not to pay them, because if not, you got a problem. I'm saying we need to take them to freaking, as a deceptive act and practices, to legal office and have them figure out what's going on. That's how it's supposed to work. That's what the system is there for. And so if they won't do it, well, then it's time to go to your commander and say, Commander, they wouldn't do this. And get enough stars to, put a little pressure on them. Maybe they'd do the right thing. And then another really important thing is under Title 50 of the United States Code, right? War and National Defense, in Section 4012, Certificates of Service, where it says in any proceeding under this chapter, taxes and mortgages and shit like that, that's all covered in this chapter. A certificate signed by the Secretary concerned is prima facie evidence as to any of the following facts stated in the certificate. Right? That a person named is not, has been, or has not been in military service. Time and place the person entered the military service. Person's residence at the time of entering the military service. Rank, branch, and unit of military service of the person upon entry. The inclusive dates of the person's military service. The monthly pay received by the person at the date of issuance of the certificates, received by the person. at the date of the certificate's issuance, and time and place of person's termination or release from military service, or a person's death during military service. And so any veteran who's died has died in military service because he's never been released. And so this form would have all this information on there. And, it's prima facie evidence. So this is foolproof evidence used in any court to prove the statements that were made in the form. So I want them to give this to me because it will prove if I'm in the military, and if I am, how much I'm getting paid. I say I'm getting paid today. It just isn't coming to me. It's going to being deposited into some retirement account or some other account. It could even be that we're a missing status, right? If you had somebody who went on terminal leave and never came back, they're missing. If you had somebody who was told to report to the reserves and never ended up being there or getting in contact with them or contacted by them, well, it could be assumed that they're missing, right? And there's these errors in these records that are keeping us from getting what's ours. And because the United States is under martial law, it has been since 1863, there is no civilian government, there is no Congress. All that shit that you see is the United States of America, which is a private jurisdiction in the United States, but it's not the constitutional government created by the Constitution. Right? That shit's all been suspended because we're under martial law. And so, in a martial law civil government, veterans would be part of the government because we haven't been released. And according to the Lieber Code, this Article 2 of the Lieber Code, once martial law has been declared, it takes a special proclamation or a treaty of peace to rescind it. Neither of those happened after the Civil War, or neither of those happened with the Civil War, because the Civil War never ended. All there was an armistice, which is a prolonged ceasefire. And the same thing happened after World War I. They acted like in World War I that there was going to be a peace treaty, but it was never ratified. Never fucking happened. So we're at war domestically and internationally. And so really all there is military law. And again, in military law, death or injury to an unborn child, any person subject to this chapter who engages in conduct that violates any of the provisions of law listed in subsection B is thereby cause of death of or bodily injury as defined in Title 18 to a child who is hereunto or utero at the time the conduct takes place is guilty of a separate offense under this section and shall upon conviction be punished by such punishment other than death as court-martial may direct. They can be court-martialed, and that any frickin' hospital with a gold or with a flag on a flagpole, which is all of them, they're all subject to the UCMJ. They're all under military jurisdiction. So to use this, we have to figure out a way to get legal services or legal assistance to do their thing. One other thing I found was, like in the Michigan State Bar, right, the Bar Association for Michigan, Military Legal Assistance Resources, right, they had a list of military legal assistance resources here in the United States. And so, so what I did after I got this denial, just to go back real quick, right after this got denied, I just took the same thing because nowhere on here does this say it has anything to do with the Navy, right? The only page that had anything to say about the Navy was this last page. So I just made a copy of the first 3 pages, and I found a number of these military assistance places online. Right, like I found, what did I say? Right, this one here. right? They had an email address, so I sent it to them, right? Because these are all interconnected. They're not just for whoever they say they are. They're for anybody who's in the DoD. And all this information is kind of covered under Miscellaneous Rights and Benefits, which is Title 10, United States Code, Chapter 53, where legal assistance is down here. You have all these other things also that are all, these are the benefits that you're supposed to have because you're still in the military. That they're trying to tell me I don't have because they say that I'm a disabled veteran without saying I'm a disabled veteran medically retired. Well, if I'm a disabled veteran medically retired, like this other place said they couldn't help, right? Here, these people said, who's ineligible, right? Disabled American veteran medically retired. Okay, well, prove it. Where's the proof that I am? Now, I didn't get any of these people yet, but, the Navy said I was a disabled veteran. That's why they couldn't, that I wasn't qualified. So, it's just this word game shit they play, and we're going to just have to stay on them and stick to the book and say, well, that's not what the book says, sir. And, at some point, find some way to put a little coercive force on a frickin' Esquire to make the dude, do what he's supposed to. Right? What we need is a thing called a black swan attorney. Right? I mean, they're the ones that tell the truth. Very rare. They're paid liars. It's just the way it is. All right, that's what I have for today. And so let's make way for the U.S. Navy, legal services. All right, if you can get them to sign the papers, it's a real powerful weapon in your arsenal. It hasn't worked yet, but it doesn't mean that it won't. Right? So it would be really helpful if you get more people to try these things. And whether it works or not, let me know what they did. But if we lean on them harder, maybe we'll get something to happen with it. Right? So court of record at AOL.com. Let me know how it goes. All right. Y'all have a great day, and God bless. We'll see you.